to see you.
Today, Kevin and I are here to share with you our interview journey
Hmm.
for product management interviews. Kevin is a PM at a FAANG company, and we met recently. And then I discovered that Kevin also had a very interesting journey preparing for these interviews, and we thought it would be very interesting and meaningful to share our stories with you. Hopefully, it could provide some guidance if you are in the process of preparing for these interviews. So,
Okay,
Kevin, can you introduce yourself?
sure. Hey, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. I've been working as a PM for a little bit over 12 years now, and mostly in startup and recently in the fan company. And definitely, this is a topic that I'm really interested to talk with Nancy. And basically, for the PM interview, there are usually three type of questions. There's a product sense, execution, and there's a leadership. And today we're focused on the product sense because that's something that's really tricky, especially like product thinking. How do you showcase the empathy for users? So definitely reach out to Nancy if you have any additional questions. But some of the advice I observe is that before I interview with the fan company, for the product sense, usually the question type are like, how would you design an Uber for kid? How would you design a refrigerator for the blind? And a lot of time, like the interview process is testing on how you can put yourself not only in the user's shoes, but also potentially how do you empathize with the different stakeholders. So based on my background of practicing about 250 mock interviews, I found out there are three tips I wanted to share with you all. So the first one is I do a lot of self studies. You want to make sure you are knowledgeable about the different frameworks. There's no perfect framework. Whatever works for you is the best framework. So you need to do a lot of practice. And the second one about the practice is more like you want to make sure you have a group of people or coach who are really knowledgeable about what is a good answer. Because typically, when you interview with a fan company, you either pass or you not pass, and you will not know where you are actually doing or bad, like most of the time. And try to work with a knowledgeable person or even like a coach like Nancy to understand like where is the gap so she can provide actionable and valuable feedback to you. And thirdly, it's more about like how you practice like the detail of the interview prep. Something that worked really well for me is find a small group of buddies, maybe do like two people brainstorming sessions or even like three people max to actually work with your peers to solve a problem. Because oftentimes, like if I just practice by myself, even for hours, there's a lot of blind spot on where I can actually think creatively or even identify some of the user pain point. So having a peer who can jot some notes or even just poke some ideas around is definitely really useful, and it can help you to gain other perspective that's outside of your ordinary train of thoughts. Um, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Nancy. Yeah, I think that's all for now. Yeah, thank you.
What you
Mm,
said really
mm,
resonated. So, you said you did 200 mock interviews.
yes.
So that means you put it at least 200 hours,
Yes, I definitely
at
feel
least.
like I did more than that. I think like a lot of, first of all, just to shout out to a lot of people who practice with me, right? I feel really inspired because a lot of people actually show a lot of passion. Even in mock interview, people can be very positive. Most of the people I met, they are really hardworking and super smart people. And that's why even though we were preparing for a mock interview, we actually gain a lot of knowledge just from talking to each other. So I highly encourage people to do that. And this is something that's very meaningful. And also, I enjoy making friends.
That is a very good point. On my own personal journey, I failed the meta interview twice. This is after I put in over at least 100 hours of prep. And I, over time, so this has been many years, about maybe more than 7 years now. But
Mm,
I didn't know what was wrong at the time. And then I realized after I got the job at Meta and after I started to interview candidates, I've conducted over 200 interviews now.
Wow.
And there's a learning though. The learning is now looking back, I know I was not prepping the right way. What I was doing was like just blindly applying frameworks and trying to memorize how to tackle different type of problems. And I don't remember how many problems I worked on, but it's at least 100 different problems, I feel.
Correct.
But over time, after putting in the hours to prep myself, and then after
Mm.
interviewing hundreds of candidates, I slowly realized that the root and the foundation is in your product thinking. If the
Mm.
product is strong, you don't need frameworks anymore. And then you could start to tackle different types of interview questions, even when you haven't thought about it before. And
Mm.
so Kevin was actually telling me earlier that when he was preparing for a meeting with me, and it wasn't even a meeting, we were just meeting up for
Uh-huh.
lunch,
Yes.
he applied product thinking to preparing for our lunch. He was thinking, what do I want? What are my
Hmm.
goals? He was thinking from my perspective, and he wanted to
Hmm.
make the lunch as productive as possible. So he was
Mm.
applying user empathy
Mm.
to our lunch session. And it was
Hmm.
just a social lunch, it wasn't a working lunch either.
Yes.
But that is an example of applying product thinking even when you're not working on preparing for interviews. The first step to product thinking is user empathy. Trying
Right.
to figure out what does the user want, what are the user's goals, what is motivating the user.
Mm.
And one thing that I noticed Kevin does really well is even when I asked him to be in this video with me, he was asking me, okay, what is your goal for this interview? Right? How do we make this interview as successful? No, no. What is your goal for this video? How do
Mm.
we make this video as relevant as possible? That is an example of product thinking that I think once you internalize what product thinking is, product sense interview then becomes a lot easier to grasp.
Wow, that's said. I really want to piggyback off what Nancy just said with another thought. It's more like framework is important, but if you have the knowledge of product thinking, then all those questions or even reasons of how to you emphasize with user will come really naturally. So you don't have to
Yeah.
force yourself to think about the user segment or force yourself to think about the pain point. Because if you just think about how you manage the experience with like your friend going to a lunch, like then you can really put yourself into the shoe, whether it's like the user or yourself, then you can empathize with the whole experience and you can provide a more genuine and
Mhm.
more practical approach to manage that experience. And it has been working really well for me.
That's a good point. What
Mm,
you said the word genuine, and I think
mm,
that is key because a lot of candidates they start the interview by saying, "Okay, I'm going to use the circle," and right away you know that they're not going to be like a top 5% or top 10% candidate because
mm,
right away it comes across mechanical.
mm,
It doesn't come across super genuine. And part of the interview process is also to give the interviewer a sense on what it's like to work with you. There's an energy that you are portraying and giving off in these interviews. If the
mm,
energy is, okay, I'm going to apply the circles framework, and then the interviewer is thinking, okay, but on the job,
mm.
we're not saying, okay, let's apply the circles.
Yes.
So we want the conversation to flow. And
Mm,
what the interviewer really wants to know is who is Kevin? What is it like working with him on the job?
yes. Definitely. Like one last comment is that applying a framework is one thing, but being able to manage the engagement and interaction with the interviewer, that's I think it's definitely more important. I actually have been in a situation where I have heard friends as well that sometimes they didn't even go through the whole framework. So maybe they didn't go to the solution or even like the North Star metric part for the product sense. And people still passed the interview because they were able to have a very deep and meaningful conversation on the mission or the why that we're building this product, and showcasing that interaction and the reasoning of product thinking is already enough for the candidate to pass, instead of just like mechanically forcing a framework and trying to check all the boxes, because that make you sound not really creative in most times.
And
Mm,
maybe we can give an example, right? Your example earlier, how would you build Uber for kids? So in
mm,
this particular example, what we want to demonstrate is, again, user empathy. The user here is kids. That is first dimension. The second dimension would
mm,
be the parents of kids who are putting their kids in Uber, right? So right away, we don't just think about the kids'
mm,
needs, but we're also thinking about the parents' needs and motivation.
mm,
Yes, the kid just wants to go from point A to point B, but what about the parents? Like,
mm,
let's think about the emotions that they're feeling. When you put your
mm,
kid in someone else's car,
mhm,
they might get kidnapped.
mm.
You might not find your kids ever again. That
Yes.
is the top number one
Mm,
fear that parents have.
correct.
So when we have that empathy, that that influences the product that we build.
Mm,
How do we give parents that sense of safety, sense
mm,
of security, and sense of trust in a
yes.
product like this? So
Mm,
that is an example of applying empathy, which then naturally translates into the solution.
very good. Yeah, if you have the empathy, it definitely showcase a lot of why you are good at doing your job, right? Because you're not just thinking about addressing the what's superficial or what might look very straightforward at first, but you're really trying to think deep, and how to help users from their perspective, or how do you make that experience better for them, even if they are not aware of such a experience. So that's super valuable skill even outside of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another thought on the Uber Kid
Hmm.
example is when we're thinking about empathy, let's try to think 3 degrees out. So first
Mm,
degree of empathy is yes, the kid wants to go from point A to point B. The second degree
mm,
is yes, parents need to know that their kids are safe.
mm,
But then what is the third degree? What happens after the parent feels that their kid is safe? Now
mm,
the parent is feeling, okay, now I don't have to drive. Okay,
mm,
now I have time to do something else. Maybe I have to
mm,
take a meeting and I can't pick up my kid from school. That's what is the consequence of not having this product is then the parent can't take that very important meeting because the
mm,
parent needs to go pick up the kid. So there is a ripple effect. Yes, you're on the surface, you're just designing a solution for kids, but then what
mhm,
you're really doing is empowering the parent to have a
mm.
life of want. So now all of a sudden the product has a different tone.
Yeah, that's definitely a really nice way to put it. The potential just coming from necessity to even improve the original value proposition. That's definitely how a product can reiterate and then become creating a better solutions for the users. Yeah, let's see. Sorry, I probably have to run.
Yes, let's wrap.
Okay. All right, that's just a sneak peek of what Coach Nancy can show you. I personally, I really enjoy talking to her and then just meeting with her and discussing about products. And she's super knowledgeable, and she has a huge amount of empathy for her students as well. How should we get in touch with you, Coach Nancy?
Yeah, you can
Uh,
find me on my website,
uh,
coachnancychu.com, and I hope to hear from you if you have any questions. Thank you so much, Kevin.
yeah, thank you so much for arranging this. I'm sure we will talk more. Hope all the best, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Okay.
bye.
Okay. Bye bye.